Obviously, my name's Darren Banks. I'm the project manager on the social housing decarbonisation project at the Haltdales in North Leeds, and this is my senior technical officer, Zaya Mohammed. We're going to go through various slides explaining what the project was like, all the peaks and troughs that we went through, and any questions, as we'll mention, we're more than happy to answer, be it through email or sometime in the future. Yeah. Any questions you've got, however dumb they may seem, or however intelligent they may seem, just feel free to send them over. So obviously the agenda is the development itself, achieving the handovers that we did, the interventions for the roofing, the air source heat pumps, and the ventilation, the LED lighting, the solar panels, the external wall insulation, and all the site-related issues that we came up against in the project as it progressed. So, as mentioned, the Wimpey no fines properties that we were working on, built around 1975. There was a mixture of houses and flats. There was major fuel poverty issues in this particular area of the city, and in total there was 192 flats across between 34 blocks that were highlighted to us, and a mixture of leaseholders and tenants. And thermographic data shows major heat loss in these properties, backed up with EPC data, a plethora of different repairs that were carried out over time on the actual fabric of the building, major issues with roofing and things like that. So it really was a good example of an estate that we could target for this type of project going forward. And the roof in detail to start off with, as I've explained in other presentations, was a major headache from us. So straight off the bat, when we got to site, we realised that there was a need to change the design on the roof. We were down for a traditional roof, concrete interlocking tiles. But in order to achieve the difficult PAS 2035 retrofit standard that were mandated that same year that we took on this project, we realised quickly that we had to upgrade to a warm roof deck. Significant cost to that, obviously, around the region of 1.3 million on top. So it was quite a large chunk of money to absorb before the project had even got started. So we were already on the back foot, particularly if you look in the picture, you could see that we were starting, we got to site midwinter. So with those roofs exposed and things like that, the delays and the knock-on effects as a result of that design change had a major cost and also time delays later on in the project. And then the air source heat pumps themselves, which originally again were down for a Valiant system, which I believe is a German system, and again supply chain issues, semiconductor issues in China meant that the supplier couldn't keep with the demand that we needed for every single dwelling, and therefore we had to change air source heat pumps again early on in the project. The manufacturer we eventually found was a company called Ideal that were based out of Hull. They were just building a new plant there, so it was a bonus in terms of keeping the labour sort of local and materials, which obviously helps develop a financial equilibrium in the local economy by keeping everything local, which is one aspect of the business or the project that we were trying to achieve as well at the time. Also keeping the carbon footprint down, because we didn't want contractors traversing the country in order to get to site, including materials. And then the external wall insulation, the EWI, again rigid insulation board that were around 200 mil that we affixed to the building, obviously after relevant pull tests and things like that were carried out. And then there were site-related matter issues like the overall design of the estate meant that access was extremely poor. I'm sure you've all worked on estates like this, and to think that somebody's been to university and designed that, the access were appallingly bad. So there were issues around getting the materials actually up to the properties themselves, the constraints with parking and one thing and another, and little issues that could cause major headaches, like the such as your refuse, your bin days and things like that was something that were kind of overlooked at the time. But again, it were all new to us, so we'll learn as we'll go in. Obviously, we, as part of the handover process, we get the trust back guarantees on all the materials that we used. The snagging, again, were a difficult area for the contractor and the subcontractors themselves, because again, it was new to them as it was to us. And as you're probably all experiencing, the labour shortages and the should I say, the skill sets were difficult to source, and as again I've mentioned previously, we're kind of all vying for the same sort of skilled labour, if you like, which ramps up the cost. And again, that can become a headache on any given contract, really, because you're looking at what could be described by principal contractors as force majeures, and all these additional kind of headaches that were coming in that we had to consider. So keeping good relationships with a principal contractor is absolutely necessary, and trying to understand their position as well, and trying to emphasize your own is challenging in itself, but in terms of keeping those relationships going, it's vitally important in order to get the project to be a success. And then this is an example of the air source heat pumps that we were using at the end, which is the ideal system. Because we changed to the ideal system meant that we couldn't use the switchy device that would have accompanied the Valent system, which is the smart thermostat, and that sort of device was key to this project, because that's what collects all the data, and it worked in conjunction with the Valent system. But because we changed, that meant we had to, well, there's significant costs associated with upgrading that system so they could be compatible with one another. And then the fire stopping, again, we're learning as we're going there, weren't we? There were examples of on this particular archetype, there was like a cubbyhole for storage, and it wasn't viable to use those areas anymore, because by the time you put the external wall insulation into that sort of void area, there were no space left. So again, headaches around tenant liaison and getting them to understand the difficult situation that we were in. Decisions not taken lightly. So yeah, extra cupboard space required internally also for additional components we needed to make them compatible. Again, ventilation was challenging. We did originally want the ventilation isolator to be out of arm's reach, but then again, you kind of question, well, what's the point in the isolator? Problems resulted from that further down the line that we're experiencing now at the moment, is that maybe due to education of the tenants, that turning these things off can be a major problem, because what we found, obviously, with this property when it was first constructed, it was a property that could breathe. Thus, you know, you didn't have as much condensation as you do before you start upgrading the property by putting double glazed windows and an improved roof, and the quality of living's changed. So obviously it's all about heat retention now, but you've got to have a property that can breathe as a result of putting on these additional measures. And in my opinion, by putting the external wall insulation on, we put this property on life support, so it is dependent on breathing at all times. So that ventilation has to be on 24/7. And when tenants, we've found a switching the ventilation system off, it can lead to a rise in moisture in the air, which results in condensation that can be then some may determine that as rising damp, and you know where the dew points are in the property. So I can't stress enough, lots and lots of education to the tenants about the ventilation, the importance of ventilation and keeping that property breathing, particularly the ventilation system, the mechanical ventilation system that we put on these buildings. And here's an example of the external wall insulation. Render with pebble dust to ensure a good finish. Me and Zahir took on the project once it had been procured. And when we looked at it, we kind of put our own take on it in terms of colour choice and make sure that we're all kind of in sync. So we went for a white finish with the black fascias and soffits, black PVC door, or box, should I say, black composite door, and silver handles and all that sort of thing. There were also canopies on these properties as well, which were a solid concrete canopy that ran the whole length of the building. They had to be taken off, obviously, because of cold bridging, and to keep the external wall insulation continuous were important. So yeah, that one other area that were overlooked because there were a sense that they should have been kept, but obviously that wasn't an option for us at the end. And other things that you need to be aware is do walkovers of the site where you're going to be installing this project. Just have a look around and think where could the potential problems be. So because with this project we're kind of rushed with the funding constraints and things like that, we didn't have enough time to plan it as we would have liked, and therefore the paths which were considerably the size of them will be on, well, I think it were under 1.2 meters, which what highways kind of said was the minimum amount there could be. So obviously if you've got one block one side of a footpath and another block another side, you've got 200 mil of insulation. You're narrowing that footpath by 400 mil, which is significant. So site walkover, just try and have a look around and see where the potential problems could be with your projects. Otherwise they'll just catch up with you later down the line. And then obviously double sealed internal corners to ensure the water trick away from the EWI. So as you've seen with any type of render, prolonged exposure to rainwater can cause staining on the render, which we designed that out. Another site related issues with the access for final handovers. You need to be in and out of those properties about 30 times, which causes major tenant fatigue, particularly during the winter's most challenging. So be clear from the start with your tenants just how many times you're going to have to be in and out of that property in order to get it compliant and handed over correctly. And the final checks for the EPC data, crucial. Troubleshooting issues with systems and tenants, as I've mentioned. Decoration payments are around £100 per property for the reveals on the new windows and doors. Again, redesign access to waste collection bins and stores, and grass cutting schedule, landscape, and little things like that, what can cause major complaints and headaches. And obviously, as an example of the air source heat pump that we're originally down for, you see that picture there where the air source heat pump's exposed. You can't really have it exposed at ground level just due to vandalism things. So we put cages around our security cages so they couldn't be switched off at the isolator. Additional cost there.
Yeah. So Zahir Mohammed, Senior Technical Officer. So I'll just talk through some of the handover challenges, specifically in terms of what we have to deal with whilst we're actually carrying out the work, and also in terms of at the end, in terms of this project, there was a lot of tenant education for the new technologies, and as Darren's mentioned, there's a different way of working when you have these new technology measures in place. The air source heat pumps are different to the gas powered boilers, and also in terms of the ventilation is far more economical. So we've found that actually tenants are needing to be provided further education in respect of the technology themselves, letting them know how much the cost of ventilation is. It's very small amounts of pennies in respect of how they work per day, but still with the cost of living crisis, we're seeing that people are actually starting to maybe make those lifestyle changes and still expecting that the measures cost a little bit of money. So that education has gone through to as a council, to our housing staff who actually manage the area through their housing office, which is local to them. So they've been taught how to use the technology. Handover packs have been provided. Housing staff been trained through by our provider. In terms of registering the contractors, all of the actual handover challenges that we had on that was to actually ensure that Trustmark was the way to go in respect of the contractors, and ensure that They're all registered on Trustmark, and we're still going through the final bits of that. I think we've done over 100 through Trustmark at the moment in terms of handovers, and we will be getting the last 90 or so properties included on there. The amount of paperwork is large. I think it's 3,000 plus documents that have to be uploaded to Trustmark for every measure overall, for every solar panel or solar panel system, and SOC pump and others. So it is a big task for our retrofit coordinator and retrofit assessors to do, but they're making good headway. So in terms of this, it's a successful project as a result of that. In terms of tenant feedback, we ensured that we were actually including any issues that tenants may have in terms of taking that forward in regard to anything they may be seeing in the defect liability period. So far, we've had only minor issues or a system here and there which may not have worked, or in terms of how to use the system, we're still educating people where new tenants may come in and providing those handovers and making sure that they're in terms of monitoring framework, again, in terms of reporting issues, there is something there in place from both from the contractor and from ourselves, and we're doing that quite successfully. In terms of other, handover challenges, training on the SO sweeper mentioned, video content, we have been providing the tenants with a video and a link because a lot of people are connected up in through the internet, and they can actually be provided that. In terms of switchy training on the portal and troubleshooting with housing staff, that's taken place as well. We're still yet to fully get switchy equipment on to start the monitoring and evaluation, but that we're well ahead of that, and it's just a case of somebody signing a document to enable us to do that. In terms of customer satisfaction, we've been gauging tenants' feelings about the work. On the whole, everyone's really happy about the work. At the start of the project, we had a lot of resistance to change. Then we had a critical mass of tenants that came on board. Others saw the measures and saw what was happening in terms of the wider crisis going on in terms of the cost of living, and they've really come on board through that. And now we've actually got the opposite, where people are turning around and saying they want the measures, but we've achieved the overall spend. So it's a case of we can't give them that work. So BAs need to step in there, I think, for the future, because it has been a very successful project. In terms of comprehensive snagging process and the handover with contractors, our aim was to actually ensure that 100% of the homes were snagged. It was a very difficult task. We did achieve it. We are still in the defect liability period, and we're moving forward with that as well. In terms of, as mentioned before, over 3,800 documents on the website, and that's all been included on there, and we've achieved over 100 of the property, so only 90 left to do. This is the before picture. It kind of illustrates what we were dealing with. You can see, if I show you the next picture in terms of the thermographic data, you can see that the largest amount of heat is going through the walls. I think that's also what's reflected in past 2035. 35% of the heat loss within a building fabric is through the actual building envelope of the walls. But you can see the actual very yellow areas are the doors and also the bin stores. There were some inbuilt concrete bin stores, and this is the problem with Wimpey no fines. After in the 1940s and up to the 1950s, there was a boom in construction of these type of concrete buildings, and they were put up so quickly they didn't really look at them. And at the time, they were vouched for in terms of single leaf walled buildings, and these were seemed to be reasonable in respect of the heat loss that they were providing. So since then, we've got more of a challenging climate change targets going on. So in respect of that, it's always going to be EWI. And here we can see the overall achievement of what we've achieved. We turned a property that was a D-rated property, had major heat losses, and we've turned it into an A property. All the upper flats, which had a concrete floor, could achieve the EPC A standard. The ground floor flats, the only thing that were missed was the actual underfloor heating, underfloor insulation, which was missed. But there is a government program for that, and that can be achieved for the future. And they turned out to be a B. And then because of leaseholders and because they had to go through a separate LAD 2 funding, we had to fill out applications with those leaseholders. and they could actually only achieve a C only because they couldn't have the air source heat pumps. We managed to get them the windows and doors through the LAD2 funding because we pooled the money from the LAD2 that comes through on other applications within the local authority. So we were perfectly placed to enable us to deal with all the leaseholders, and we didn't want to be held back by leaseholders. I know that's been a big problem in previous schemes and across the country as a whole. In terms of this, you can see that's the same building, and you can see the standard that's been achieved. It's a very high standard overall. And the upper flats there are the ones, you know, they can all be accessed from the ground floor, but the upper flats have a stairway going upstairs, and they're the A standard properties, and the lower ground, the ground floors are B as such. And then overall, you know, you can see here what was on the left hand side, and now on the right hand side, they're more fuel efficient, they're better, they're achieving a better standard, and you know, it's a case of having more properties if we can. You can see there the contrast between the two properties. You can see that that's one that still needs the work, and we have as a whole around 3,000 Wimpey no fine properties as part within Leeds across the city, and we've just achieved a drop, as you can see, in the ocean of that, and it just requires more work and more funding. It cost us around about £55,000 per property to upgrade to this level. I think that's probably changed, as Darren mentioned, in respect of, you know, the wider inflation and the cost majeure in terms of the overall provider, what they had to kind of go through at the end of the project. But it kind of illustrates to you, you know, what's been achieved, and it's kind of a one that it can relieve the issues of fuel poverty. You know, if we want to actually put the money forward to be able to do that. So I'd like to thank everybody for that. But thank you very much for your time.